Hello and welcome to my midweek musings. That that title's just come to mind. I'm actually doing this a bit late. This was supposed to happen last night, but I'll get to that a little bit later. I was going to talk about last night, I was going to talk about forgiveness because I don't know, I guess it's that time of year, isn't it? We're coming up to Christmas and it's a time of um, families and reconciliation and, letting bygones be bygones and all that sort of good feeling and best wishes. And yeah, a- and also I've been talking to some people this week who are struggling with forgiveness, um, who are in situations where they're finding it really hard to forgive somebody else. So I was thinking about all the times where I've been in that place, and there's been several. And I realized that when I thought about forgiveness, I thought about it in terms of big things, forgiving when something had happened in my life that I felt was somebody else's fault, and I had to forgive them for it. And they were fairly big situations and things of mine that came to mind, and I was reflecting on how I used to think that forgiveness was, it was like a process you went through somehow. There were things you could do in order to forgive the other person and understand the other person, and then you feel better at it. But it did seem that I couldn't get a kind of grip on that process in a lot of cases, um, until I was introduced to the three principles and started to see things a little bit differently, how we living in our own separate realities, our own kind of emotional, psychological world that um, is just, it's our reality. It's separate to us. It's our experience of life as we're living it moment to moment. And I started to get a grip or an understanding of that, which was what I was going to talk about. And still with a focus on kind of big things, and I was going to give you some examples of some of those things and how I'd come to see through this understanding that, we're living in our own separate reality, and what makes sense to us in any given moment is simply what makes sense to us. It looks real to us, so we behave accordingly. But actually, I went on a little bit into thinking or seeing about forgiveness in a slightly different way, about forgiving little things. And I suppose that's because of what happened last night. So I'm going to try and uh, speak to that. So I um, came on to my for my 7 o'clock Zoom, and I was sitting here in my office, ready, um, with these ideas flowing about forgiveness. And my husband was home, and my space here, my office is kind of halfway up the stairs, and the stairs are in the lounge. So it's not a million, we're not I'm not in a very, it's a small house, so I can hear what's going on in the lounge and in the rest of the house, really. And obviously, I'd um, spoken to my husband about the fact that I was going to do this call and I was going to record, etc., etc. And I asked him to keep the telly down and, um, just be a little bit aware that I was also going to record it. So I'm sitting here thinking about forgiveness and preparing to record, regardless of whether anyone turned up or not. And it suddenly seems that the television, I can hear it, it's getting louder. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to ask him to, it's getting, and I get totally distracted basically by that. So, um, and I suppose there's other things going on in my mind about the fact that, nobody looks like nobody's going to show up this evening. So never mind, I'm going to go ahead anyway. And then, the television's in the background. Then all of a sudden, I hear um, my husband talking and quite loud. And I realize that he's made a phone call and he's got it on loudspeak. So I'm sitting here thinking this isn't working because I can hear his conversation quite plainly. Um, and it's I'm totally distracted basically from talking about anything at all. So I sit for a little while longer and I start to talk, but I can still hear this conversation going on in the background. And then I'm just like, ah, that's it, can't do this. So I quit, stop record, and I throw open the door and I go out and I'm like, Tim, I was going to record. So I start, going on about but I was annoyed. So I'm kind of cross and I stomp into the room and sit down on the settee and sulk, basically. And my husband's like, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but so and so called and it was important and everything else." And he's deaf actually as well. He's quite deaf, so he does have tend to have things low. So I'm sitting there feeling really quite irritated and quite like that's it. And I've got little thoughts running through my head, right, I'm not going to speak to you. And I kind of grab the remote of TV and flick onto uh, something I want to watch. And he's like, "Oh, I was watching that." I was going, "No, you weren't. You were on the phone, blah, blah, blah." So yeah, so that goes on. So anyway, we sit there quietly and I can feel myself, I notice how worked up I am, which goes back to what I was talking about last week. Obviously, that, that noticing, and I'm just like, ah, and I suddenly remember how, how forgiveness it isn't just about the big things. It's about the little things that crop up within a relationship. The little things you bicker about and fight about and sulk about and everything else. And I suddenly just noticed how I was feeling and how I was generating that feeling myself. And I remembered talking um, talking about this in the schools, in classrooms, where we used to talk about how we make up rules. We have rules that we make up, that we live by, that we defend to the death, pretty much, in terms of what we think we need in order to be okay. And if you can imagine that you're, kind of as a human being, you're sat on top of your world. We used to make these little Play-Doh worlds, so just a little circle of Play-Doh, and we would put a little gem or jewel inside it, which would represent our innate well-being, the fact that we actually have everything we need psychologically, emotionally. It's already in us, it's already inside. So we would make these little Play-Doh I should make one really, worlds that represented our separate reality with the innate well-being within it. And then we would talk about the rules that we make up as we travel through life, the things that we start to believe we need in order to be okay, because we forget that we already are. Because we can't see it, can we? I mean, you can't touch innate well-being. You can't touch psychological and emotional well-being, your psychological system. It's invisible. And your separate reality is that it's something you can't actually see. So it's really easy to forget that we're always okay. And we start making these rules, and the rules are really, they're not just things that we prefer. They're not things we'd rather have. They're things that are crucial to our psychological well-being. We believe we need them in order to be okay. So, for example, you know, I I I believe and I need people to respect my opinions, and I need uh, Jim, in this case, to respect that the work I do is important, not just to me, but in the grand scheme of things. I need him to value that, and I need him to behave accordingly. And I also need the things I create to be right, so I have an attachment. It's to things um, turning out a certain way, to things being going to plan. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Um, and these rules that we make up, when we made these little Play-Doh balls, our world, we would put stick flags in them, little flags with our needs written on them, and they would be things like, I need um, I need my opinion to be respected. I need my space as well is another one. Um, and these, like I say, these are things that you really defend to the death almost. So they become part of who you think you are as well. And of course, everybody has these. They've all got their own little rules and things. And when it comes to relationships, these rules often clash. So, for example, like uh, my rule about um, things going according to plan, um, is probably clashing. Again, I'd have to talk to Jim about his rules, but I know that, for example, his rules are very much that he doesn't like, well, he doesn't like to be told what to do. That's one of his rules, that's for sure. But also, he likes his routine. He likes order and routine. So for him, the evenings are very much not about work. So he works during more normal sort of 9 to 5 hours and comes home, has supper, dinner, whatever, sits down, watches telly, and his routine is really important to him. So you can see straight away where that might clash, because my routine is all over the place, really. Not all over the place, but it varies um, day to day. And I work evenings sometimes and so forth. So you start to see where these rules, they start to clash. And it's not it's not against the other person. what you're fighting for, you're fighting for is protecting your rule, what you really believe that you need in order to be okay. And the reason this came to mind was because last night, as I say, I was going to talk about forgiveness, and I was thinking about the kind of the big things. And as I sat on the settee and noticed my annoyance and my I'd slipped into a tendency of kind of sulking, really. I'm not going to speak to you. I'm just going to watch telly and be cross. That feeling, which is not very comfortable, I don't like being in that feeling, but it is like a little alarm going off. It's it's an alarm. It's a way of me noticing that something has threatened my one of my rules. And even if I'm not clear about what the rule is, I I mean it's helpful to know what to recognize the things that you think you need in order to be okay. But it's enough as well just to see that something has rattled you, something's rattled the cage. And that's what happened last night. I was like, oh, something, I really have got rattled here. And just the noticing of it was enough for me to soften and remember that that flag I'm protecting is because I've also forgotten that I already have everything I need, and I don't need the flag. I can surrender that flag a little bit. I can give it up in this instance. And that when that happens, when you see that and you surrender that rule, um, your what is in you naturally, your natural compassion and wisdom and resilience is available to you again. And it's like it's just a moment. And I think when I can see that in that moment, I then see the flags and the rules of the other person. And I realize that they're not their actions and their behavior isn't actually directed at me. They're just in their own, in their separate reality, in their world, in their experience, doing what makes sense to them because of what they think they need, which is to have, the evening, in Jim's case, to sit and watch the telly and, if I think it was his daughter who rang, if his daughter rings, to pick up the phone and speak to her. He didn't actually, he wasn't actually trying to sabotage my recording. I hope I hope this makes sense. I'd love to hear back from you with my musings, which I'm recording at I don't know how many hours late. Forgiveness. It's the little forgivenesses, isn't it? Because the moment all that happened, which it happens in just moment to moment, um, it doesn't take as long to happen as it does to talk about it in my squeaky chair. But it's those little forgivenesses that you are that happen in a relationship make all the difference, because years ago I would have probably sat and sulked much longer. I would have hung on to my discomfort and my irritation and my anger and um, not behaved particularly well. And maybe even added to it, just poked at it a bit more and turned it into something that was really not there. And that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen anywhere near as much as it would have done a few years ago. So yeah, so that's my musings on forgiveness. The big forgiveness and the little forgiveness. And it ties in with what I was talking about last week, doesn't it? With the things that we notice and the fact that we're so well designed to to deal with life. And once we get a little bit more understanding about how we work and the fact that how we function psychologically, it it makes things easier. It makes things less serious, life less serious. So yeah, so that's my musings for this week. And yeah, and just in case you're wondering, it didn't turn into anything at all. And I just decided to sit and watch telly and with my husband and record this if it was still in my head um, today, which is what I've done. So yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody if this landed for you at all, or if you have any questions, please please get back to me. Okay, that's it for now. Bye.